So I've always wanted to have like a podcast or, a space where I can discuss all kinds of things. I've always been a very curious person, or so I told myself. And, I have questions. I like, conversing with other people who are not only like minded, but also have their own particular, views and perspective on things. And so I've been wanting to do this for like a long time, as I mentioned. And I'm doing it now. And I am not sure where I'm going to go with this. Or how I'm going to go about it. I don't really have a plan here. But, I want to talk about law of assumption, quantum physics, life, relationships, whatever kind of comes to mind, but mainly, the law of assumption and tying quantum physics into it because I've kind of been into the law. I mean, my story, I started back in 2019 with the law of attraction. And, at first I did it the what you the whole frequency thing, high vibrations, and you attract what you vibrate to and all of that. And I meditated religiously and did my affirmations all day long, and I had my journals, and I made sure that I always felt great and I didn't feel sad or concerned, just so I didn't fall out of my vibrations. And it worked, great. And I manifested, quote unquote, so many things, but at some point I kind of started getting lazy because I started feeling like work, having to wake up. I remember I used to watch these videos on YouTube, and those extreme people, and it's like, oh, the most disciplined people wake up at 5 a.m. or sorry, not even 5, like 4 a.m. and you make sure you plunge in ice water and make sure you do this and that and all of that, and I was like, okay, this is getting exhausting because I'd wake up every day at 5 a.m. I had my alarm on. I'd write out a whole list of all the things I was grateful for. And, and oftentimes I didn't even feel grateful. I was like, well, is this going to mess up my manifestation, So anyway, I did it, and then I kind of just started drifting off because it started to feel like work. And if I wasn't doing it, then it wasn't going to work for me. And so, it was always in the back of my mind, but I kind of just didn't really care for it. And then, not knowing what I know now with the law of assumption and the perfect unfolding, as they call it, I can say I can see how everything was part of the bridge, if you will. But I came across the law of attraction in actually just a year ago. And it's funny because when I found law of assumption, when I found the law of attraction, I discovered Neville Goddard, and he talked about the law of assumption, but at that time I didn't quite understand what he was, talking about. And now I do. And now I've realized that, oh, this was what I was looking into, but I didn't quite understand it back then. But last year I fell really deep into the law of assumption, and I don't mean that in like a bad way, but I started seeing these videos, how to get a text and how to get this in, overnight and whatever. And so I started like, at that point I was seeing someone, it wasn't going great, and I was feeling all these things, and I was like, well, I need a text from him, and I don't even remember how it happened, but I remember I was at the office and this, message popped up. Or sorry, this video popped up. And, it was like, oh, get a text from them by the end of this video. And I'm not going to name the creator who posted the video, but I was like, okay, let's see. And the thing is, knowing what I know now about the law of assumption, back then, I knew that I could manifest things, but I, again, had beliefs that, well, I had limited beliefs. I thought it could work for some things and not for others. So with work, I thought it worked to a certain degree because I did manifest my job. I manifested raises left and right. I manifested all kinds of opportunities, I manifested homes, and I didn't even realize these until much later. My cars and all kinds of things, but I didn't think it applied to people. I didn't think it applied to like, large sums of money or these kinds of things, because I thought maybe you had to. My brain was trying to make logical sense of it, and that was because I had the assumption that I was a logical person, and so I thought it worked, but only for certain things. And then, fast forward, like I said, to last year, I saw these videos, and so my assumption was that these videos don't work. And of course, every time I watch them, in the back of my mind, I'd be thinking, there's no way this works. But I would do the technique anyway in hopes of achieving something, but not actually believing it and assuming it didn't work. And it didn't work, and I was like, yeah, see, I knew it, right? That's goes back to the mustard seed story. But that kind of led me down this like loophole of, okay, well, let me find another technique that will work for me. And again, keep in mind, I had this assumption the whole time that these techniques don't work. And so they didn't, but I kept going down the loophole. And again, I believe now that I had to go down that loophole because it led me to where I am now. And I have understood the law of assumption on a greater level now, where it's like it's more than just manifesting things, but I think more than that, I'm really appreciating the quantum physics side of things, and the more profound side of things being who we are as humans, what we are, and what our purpose is. As far back as I can remember, since I was a kid, I grew up with two different religions, and practicing different beliefs and hearing people's interpretations of what they believe the religion to be. It always really confused me because, I think, well, on the Christian side of things, we used to go to church, but our church accepted gay couples, right? But in Islam, the other side of my beliefs as a kid, it was a sin. You couldn't have same-sex marriage. So I was confused by that. And then, people, like I said, would interpret it the way they thought, and, they'd say one thing but do the other. And so it never made sense. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to hell because I'm not abiding by any of this, and I'm clearly doing it all wrong. And that, scared me even more so, because then I thought, well, I'm just a kid. Why am I going to hell for something that I don't really know? Or I remember the extreme side of things when I went back home to visit my country, Afghanistan, in 2008. And I was talking to my cousins, and, I asked her, I'm like, okay, well, why do we cover up? What's the purpose of this? And so on and so forth. And she tried to explain it the way she was taught. And I remember she said, it's obviously to preserve modesty, and, your body should be for your husband, and blah, blah, blah. She wasn't much older than I was. I think I was 11 at the time, and she must have been like 16, maybe a little bit younger. And I remember she told me, you have to be so covered up that your own brother can't even see a single strand of your hair. And if he does, you're going to hell. And I thought, oh my fucking goodness. My trip to hell is confirmed. By that point, aside from everything else, just because of my hair, I was like, my brother has seen my hair. He's seen he's seen my hair every freaking day. I thought I was going to hell, and that was that, And so that further increased my fear, and, I just was like, okay, I don't know how I feel about this. And I kept asking questions, and, at some point, I think in high school, I ended up kind of deviating from religion altogether, and I went around saying I didn't really believe in God because it just didn't make sense. If there's a God, why is there war and this and that? Not knowing that these were all assumptions that I kept or believed in because of the environment and the people I was around, and so on and so forth. And like I said, I think everything now, knowing what I know now, it makes sense. But the quantum physics explains the how and the why to me now. And I recently watched a video by Nassim Haramein, who is a genius. Oh my God, the way he explained his theories and the way he like integrates spirituality with science, just blew my mind. And he had the similar curiosity, but his, was more scientific. And the reason why I'm even, I think, trying to open this space up is because, as I mentioned, I considered myself to be someone who thought I was always logical and I needed, an explanation or proof. Not that we need proof. I mean, I am my own proof. I've proved myself time and time again that manifestation and, what you believe and assume comes to you out of thin air because I've done it. But I think there was a little part of me that wanted that, like, explanation behind it. What do you mean that I can think something and then it will come to be? What is the science behind that, right? There has to be something behind it. No matter who you are, I'm sure you have some kind of curiosity, right? Well, at least I did. And so I didn't know anything about quantum physics. I always thought I hated science, and although I was good in biology and those kinds of things in school, I thought, like, chemistry, I hated chemistry. So much so that I convinced my my counselor in high school to drop me out and give me some other random class to take so I didn't fail. And she did. But, through the law, I discovered the quantum physics aspect of things, and it's starting to make more and more sense. And I want to be able to discuss things with people, like I said, that are like-minded or not, and have different beliefs and ideas and perspectives. But, back to Nassim. In his video, I mean, within the first 5 minutes, and if I can link it, I will try to link it in the description box, but within the first 5 minutes of his presentation, he said, if you gave a blind man a Rubik's Cube and you told him to try to solve it, there is because, a Rubik's Cube is 3 rows by 3 columns, so on and so forth, 6 colors and all of that. If you give it to a blind man, there's a 1 in 1.4 trillion chance that he would get it right. Okay? And that is a crazy probability. And then he went on to explain how the creation of our existence, of the universe, was less than that 1 in 1.4 trillion probability. And he said, taking that into consideration, if you tell this blind man that he is either closer or farther away from the goal, brings that probability down to far, 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 far less. And I don't remember the exact number, but you'll see it in the video. And it all because someone, told this blind man, like, oh, you're closer to the goal or you're farther. And that changes everything. So how is it that this one sentence took a 1 in 1.4 trillion chance and decreased it by a huge sum, And so I was like, wait a minute, that got me. And then, I kept watching, and the thing that really blew my mind was how he, kind of explained us, like who we are and what we are, what our purpose is. And, I think for a lot of us, at least in my experience, we are raised to believe that our existence is completely random, and it's, some crazy probability of like 1 in whatever trillion, billion, whatever numbers, and that it can't be replicated, and that it's a 1 in 1 event kind of thing. But he, I don't know if disproved is the right word, but he kind of moved away from that theory because he did some testings. First he said, like, we as humans, we are made up of atoms, 100 trillion atoms or whatever. And atoms are just a combination of protons, neutrons, and electrons and what forth, right? And so he took the proton of an atom, of one single atom, and, analyzed it and did weights and measurements and whatever. And he found that the mass of that one single proton within that atom is the mass of the universe. And so we have 100 trillion atoms with 100 trillion protons within us. That's far greater than the universe. far, 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 far greater than the universe, right? So then, he went on to explain how we are the universe within us. It's not like we're in the universe is in us. And that really solidified something in my mind. And he again, it's a great video, and he went on to explain how he is using his findings to further, I don't know, advance humanity, if you will. I don't want to spoil it, but he did some testing. He, he made an invention, and it's really, really cool. But that made me think even more because, I was talking to a friend, and nothing about life is random. You look at the way we are designed. No two humans have the same fingerprint, and, our bodies function, all of our cells function in a manner to keep us alive, and it does a great job every single day. How can that be random? And it does it in a very perfect way. You put the seed in the ground and you soil it, then you water it, and there's sunlight, and it grows perfectly, right? So it's like all of these things can't be random, because if we just came randomly from a cell, how is it that all of these things know what they're supposed to be doing to survive and grow and live and continue? Look at the process of evolution itself. And again, Nassim used this example of a bee. He's like, how does a bee know that it needs to go to a flower to get the pollen, right? And so how does our body know what it needs to do, One of my personal experiences was, I had a lot of pets growing up. And back in 2021, I adopted my baby kitten, Pancake. He was, I think, like 4 weeks at the time, and they were abandoned. And anyway, long story short, I had to relieve them at first because they were too tiny to do it on their own. Their, I guess, organs weren't fully functioning, and that's what the mama cat is supposed to do. But didn't have one. I was the mama. But when it came to a point where they could do it on their own, before they could, I got them a litter box and I put litter. And again, this is a brand new kitten. I didn't have any kittens in my apartment before. There's no smell of litter or anything. So it's like, how did he automatically know to use the litter box? I don't know. Maybe I'm sure there's a scientific explanation as to how a cat knows that a litter box is where it's supposed to go even before, even like a newborn kitty. But those are the kinds of things that make you wonder. Like, it can't just be random, But anyway, that was a little bit of my insight. Some things that kind of pique my interest. I, again, don't know. I mean, I know where I intend to go with this, right? Like I said, I'm trying to create a space that people with similar questions and thoughts and ideas can, talk about it. I love to talk. I am a certified yapper. I've met some amazing people through YouTube itself where they've created these communities, and I've, had the opportunity to chat with them and talk with them and discuss, and it's just kind of like it gets the fireworks going in your mind. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I kind of want to further do. But more than that, I want to help people. I know I've always said, since I was a kid, when people ask me, like, what do you want to do? I've always said I wanted to help people at whatever capacity it was. And, my friends and close family members will know what I mean, because some of them have personally experienced it. And, it's a journey. I don't know what to expect, but I'm intending that I expect the best and that I will have the best experience, because I say so. We are the creators of our realities, and that is something that I'd obviously further get into and talk about. And, I would love to have friends on here, colleagues, I don't know, family members, anyone that has something, that they want to say and share. But like I said, my point is to help people, because I've personally been that person who didn't believe in anything and who had questions and didn't think it was possible and thought I was doomed for failure. And I think I'm doing pretty well right now. Am I where I want to be? Not quite, but I know that's all part of the unfolding. But it's more than anything, it's the connection with humans, to be able to relate to someone and to be able to have someone who can, who you can speak with and have them understand what you're going through and not feel like you're alone, because this world is so, 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 so vast. Yet somehow people tend to feel alone quite often. Doesn't make sense, right? How are we have the universe within us, but we can't make friends, or we can't, have someone to confide in. I don't know. But if I can be that shoulder for someone to cry on, that therapist, that friend, that whatever, I've always said I'd happily do it. I had no problem. And, I think this journey has slowly led me into that. And it's been very exciting. And like I said, I'm a very curious person. So seeing and being able to speak with other people and seeing their perspectives on it and their journeys, it's very comforting in the sense, that we're all such unique individuals, yet we're all the same. And everyone's having this human experience. And, why not share it? Why not talk about it? So, yeah, again, I don't know where I'm going with this. But I know I want this to be a space that gives hope. And not just hope, but gives determination to people. Yeah, to let them know like it's possible and it works. So yeah.